Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start this video with a story about how one mom's obsession with her daughter's class rank turned into a full-blown neighborhood war. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Entitled mom accuses me of ruining her daughter's life because the school fixed their mistake. Those at my 17-year-old female high school in the top 10% of the class get a lot of special accolades and incentives. And your class rank is a major factor for our school's endorsement for college recommendations and scholarships. I noticed that I was passed in class rank by a girl, 17-year-old female, who I know for a fact is not taking as many AP classes as me. I keep track of everyone who's near me in class rank, their classes and grades, to make sure no one passes me up. AP classes are weighted in GPA over honors classes, which is what she took this semester since she said she wanted an easy semester. Based on how my school calculates GPA, the only way she could have been able to pass me was if I got all B's and she got all A's, which is not what happened at all. So I mentioned I was confused to the principal's secretary since I'm her student aide. She looked into it, and it turns out the girl's rank was miscalculated. They didn't weight her honors classes correctly, and they've since fixed it and moved her back down to where she belongs. The girls suspected it was me who brought it to their attention and told her mom. This girl lives 3 streets away from me, so her mom came to my house and confronted my mom and was like, "How dare your daughter interfere with my child's rank and her future, etc." And my mom was just like, "I guess your kid should have taken harder classes. Don't ever step on my property again." Several days later, my parents weren't home and the mom returned to our house. I answered and she was like, "I'm here to see your mom again." And I told her I'll call the police if she doesn't leave because she's trespassing. We've told her she's not allowed on our property, and she blew me off and was like, "Oh, please, let me see your mom." And I said that we have cameras filming her trespassing and threatening behavior, and her life will be ruined if she comes back. We will absolutely take legal action. The woman left spitefully, and my mom was pleased with how I handled it when she returned. But the woman went on our neighborhood site and passively-aggressively badmouthed us in a half-page rant without mentioning our name, saying we're ruining her daughter's life. So my mom was forced to respond, saying the woman is a repeated trespasser and harasser, and we will take action if forced, and we have film evidence. Still, they didn't have a right to go target a fellow student because the school miscalculated a ranking. That's on the school, no matter who noticed it. For them to be mad at you, they're saying they're angry that they didn't get away with an unearned ranking. And our second story. Patient had dementia, nurse had drama, we brought both to the ER. This story isn't exactly life or death dramatic, but it still makes me chuckle every time I remember it. When you work on an ambulance, you rack up a collection of bizarre, frustrating, and occasionally hilarious moments. This one falls firmly in the mild chaos, zero consequences category, and I honestly treasure it for that. My partner and I were working a slow midweek shift when we got a call to pick up an elderly gentleman from a nursing home. It was a standard non-emergency transport. The patient had severe dementia, nonverbal and non-responsive at baseline, and apparently some of his lab values were off. Nothing urgent, no fall, no trauma, just a routine, labs are weird, let's get him checked scenario. Because he was a veteran, he was being transported to the local VA hospital. Those types of rides are usually simple, scoop, transport, handoff paperwork, the kind of job that gives your blood pressure a break. When we got to the nursing home, the staff was ready. The man was already in a wheelchair and bundled up. He looked to be in his late 80s, small-framed and frail, and true to their report, he was non-responsive in every meaningful way. He didn't flinch when we touched him, didn't react to our voices, and stared past us with that heartbreaking, empty kind of gaze. It was clear that he'd been this way for a long time. Still, I did my due diligence. It's easy to get complacent on routine transports, but protocols are protocols. I checked his vitals, blood pressure a little low, heart rate irregular but not alarming. Definitely not normal for a healthy adult, but for someone in his condition, it was baseline. Then came the part where I had to rule out signs of a stroke. We use the acronym FAST. Face, Any facial droop? Nope. Arms. Any weakness or asymmetry? I asked him to squeeze my hands. Nothing. Just a faint twitch in one finger. Not purposeful, not even repeated. Just a singular, random twitch. Speech. He wasn't speaking at all, but again, dementia. This was expected. Time. Not really applicable here. There were no signs of an acute event. So with all that in mind, I confidently ruled out a stroke. It was obvious this man was not experiencing anything emergent. His condition was consistent with the paperwork from the facility and everything the nurses had told us. As per protocol, I called ahead to give the VA's triage nurse a report. I gave his age, condition, vitals, and the reason for transport. When I got to the part about his unresponsiveness, I clearly noted that it was long-standing dementia. Then I mentioned the twitch in his hand again, emphasizing that it was likely an involuntary muscle movement and not indicative of a stroke. And that's when the call took a left turn. Without letting me finish, the nurse on the other end cut in with an almost panicked, "You need to divert to the nearest hospital immediately," and hung up. Now, here's the kicker. The VA was already the nearest hospital. I pulled out the GPS to double check, just in case I'd missed something obvious, but nope. We were literally 5 minutes away and pulling onto their property. So technically, I was following her orders. Not that she stayed on the line long enough to hear anything else I had to say. My partner glanced over at me, clearly amused. Well, I said, guess we're diverting to exactly where we were going. We wheeled the patient inside and were met with immediate confusion. ER staff were buzzing around like something urgent had just landed on their doorstep. One nurse took the chart and looked at the paperwork, then looked at us like we'd just dropped off a Martian. I heard someone yell down the hallway, "Stroke protocol," and watched a doctor start suiting up like he was about to perform emergency surgery. Meanwhile, my partner and I just stood there trying not to laugh. It wasn't malicious, we weren't mocking anyone, but it was clear this whole scene had been kicked off by a premature panic button press from the nurse on the phone. Finally, another nurse approached and asked, "Okay, so what's going on with him?" I explained everything: routine transport, labs slightly off, no new symptoms, no stroke. I walked her through the patient's baseline, described the single twitch that had sparked the chaos, and handed her the documentation. She listened carefully, reviewed the chart, and nodded in agreement. Then, to her credit, she did her own assessment. She ran through the entire FAST test herself, even tried a few extra checks for good measure. And when she finished, she gave me a look like, "Yeah, this is exactly what you said it was." Then we both heard a voice from the far end of the room, "That's the stroke patient I diverted." We turned to see a nurse sitting at a desk trying very hard to become invisible. I recognized her voice immediately. It was the same nurse from the phone call. She gave me a sheepish glance before quickly pretending to be busy with paperwork. The other nurse raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She simply walked off with the chart, her expression saying everything that needed to be said. The rest of the visit was uneventful. The patient was admitted for observation and labs just like originally planned. No emergency, no crisis, no stroke, just a man who needed some monitoring. The only real casualty was a bit of unnecessary panic and a nurse's pride. Hopefully she learned something from it, like the importance of letting someone finish giving a report before jumping to conclusions and sounding the alarm. Especially when that someone is literally bringing the patient through the door. As for me, I went home that night with a quiet sense of satisfaction. I did my job, I followed protocol, and I got the patient where he needed to be. The chaos wasn't mine, but I got a front row seat to it, and that was plenty. It's a strange thing to say, but sometimes the best days in EMS are the ones where absolutely nothing happens, and you still end up with a story to tell. And our last story. HOA towed my car every night. I came back from college recently thinking the biggest hassle I'd face would be unpacking. Instead, I found myself in the middle of an HOA nightmare that had apparently been brewing while I was away. In our Fort Lauderdale community, all residents need a parking decal issued by the property management office, but since they were closed when I returned, I managed to get in touch with someone who gave me a digital parking permit. It was official, paid for, and clearly listed its expiration date as July 1st. I printed it out and displayed it on my dashboard, assuming everything was squared away. Then my car was towed at 2 a.m. every single night. And it wasn't just a one-time misunderstanding. I had to pay the tow truck driver $60 in cash every morning to get my car back. When I asked why this kept happening despite my valid permit, the driver just shrugged and told me the head of the HOA kept reporting my car. Once the report came in, he was obligated to tow it. It didn't matter that I had proof my permit was real and current. Once the order was in, he was just doing his job. That's when it clicked. Our neighbor, the HOA president, was behind this. He's had it out for my family since he moved in 3 years ago. We've been in this neighborhood for over 23 years, and we're the only black family here. Since his arrival, he's made a sport out of harassing us. He's nitpicked about minor things, tried to slap us with code violations over garden lights and even holiday decorations. And now he was going after me. So I took it up with the property manager, only to be told they had rescinded my permit. No explanation, no warning. I asked how I was supposed to know that, and they basically shrugged and told me they had no plans to notify me. That's when I knew it wasn't just the neighbor, the management was complicit. My mom and I weren't going to let this slide. We contacted a lawyer. Our lawyer got to work fast. We collected every receipt, every photo of the permit in my car, every text, and every email. We even had ring camera footage of the car being towed from our assigned parking spot, untouched and parked legally. With everything compiled, our lawyer filed a formal complaint with the city and began preparing a lawsuit against both the HOA and the property management company. The suit included claims of harassment, discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, and wrongful towing. Turns out our neighbor had a bit of history. The HOA board didn't take long to distance themselves. Within 2 months, the board voted to remove him as president. Apparently, our case was just the final straw after a string of other complaints he generated. Eventually, the HOA offered a settlement. We accepted it after our lawyer reviewed the terms. They reimbursed us for all the towing fees and paid additional damages totaling about $3,000. We received a formal written apology from the HOA board. Even better, they agreed to a binding rule that no resident's parking permit could be revoked without written notice and a clear appeals process. And most satisfying of all, the man who had been targeting us for years was permanently barred from holding any official position within the HOA again. He still lives nearby, but now when he walks past our house with his dogs, he doesn't make eye contact. He doesn't complain. He doesn't even wave. He knows we're not the ones to mess with anymore. We stood our ground. We fought back, and we won. HOAs can be breeding grounds for petty power trips, especially when unchecked. But when someone fights back with receipts, the system either has to change or face the consequences. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.